What would you do if a moment of humiliation turned into an empire-shifting event? For Ethan Blake, a billionaire used to quiet dominance, being kicked off a plane by a flight attendant wasn't just a personal insult, but a challenge that demanded a response. That one decision, made in a moment of frustration, would ignite a battle of power, respect, and transformation that no one could have predicted. How does a man go from being escorted off a flight to owning the entire airline? This is the story of a confrontation that spiraled into a corporate takeover, a journey fueled by ambition, retribution, and ultimately redemption. Before we dive into this gripping story of power, growth, and second chances, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you love stories of transformation and resilience, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more. It was a bustling afternoon at New York's JFK Airport. One man moved with calm assurance among the CEO. He carried no outward signs of extravagance, dressed in a crisp, understated suit, no gold watches were glinting on his wrist, and no entourage following in his wake. Ethan Blake was a reclusive billionaire whose influence spanned the worlds of technology, real estate, and high-stakes investments. Bookmark. Ethan approached Gate 19 for his flight to London. His expression was composed, betraying none of the pressure from his wealth and power. Despite his immense fortune, Ethan was a man who preferred efficiency over ostentation. He often traveled alone, quietly observing the world many thought he had conquered. Today was no different, or so it seemed. As he waited in line to board, he tapped away on his phone, finalizing a presentation for an acquisition deal that could redefine the tech industry. He was absorbed in his work, barely noticing the announcements over the intercom. A few glances were cast his way by fellow passengers, but no one gave him more than a second thought. To them, he was just another businessman on another flight. But they didn't know, and Ethan himself couldn't predict, that this routine trip would soon take an extraordinary turn. A seemingly insignificant moment was about to change not only the course of his day, but the trajectory of an entire airline. Once on board, Ethan settled in the business class cabin. He stored his laptop bag carefully in the overhead compartment and sat down with relief. Business class offered a comfortable haven for travelers like Ethan, who valued productivity during long flights. Pulling out his tablet, he resumed reviewing his notes. Time was a precious commodity, and he intended to use every moment wisely. Across the cabin, the crew prepared for departure. Among them was Laura, a young flight attendant with striking features and an air of professionalism. Laura had been with the airline for 6 years and was known for her strict adherence to protocol. However, today had been a difficult shift. A series of delays and angry passengers had worn her patience thin. By the time she reached Ethan's row, the strain was evident in her sharp, no-nonsense demeanor. "Sir," Laura said firmly, her tone brisk, "I'll need you to turn off your phone and switch it to airplane mode." Ethan glanced up from his screen, momentarily disoriented. He hadn't heard the earlier announcement about electronic devices. Nodding slightly, he began to comply, his movements measured and deliberate. Yet something about the moment, his lack of urgency, perhaps, or the way he appeared distracted, triggered an unexpected reaction from Laura. "Sir, I said you need to turn it off now," she repeated, her voice edged with frustration. "This is mandatory." Ethan paused, looking at her with calm curiosity. It wasn't in his nature to argue, but the intensity of her tone caught him off guard. "Of course," he replied evenly, holding up his phone to demonstrate his compliancy. "I'm turning it off." But Laura wasn't satisfied. The stress of the day boiled over, clouding her judgment. To her, Ethan's composed demeanor felt dismissive, almost defiant. She interpreted his response as a challenge to her authority. Bookmark. "You're not taking this seriously," she snapped, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "If you can't follow the rules, I'll ask you to leave the plane." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ethan blinked, his face a mask of disbelief. He had never been addressed this way in all his years of traveling. The cabin grew uncomfortably silent as passengers exchanged curious glances. Laura stood her ground, her arms crossed as she waited for Ethan's response. She had no idea who she was speaking to, no clue of the influence he wielded. To her, he was just another passenger, causing a minor inconvenience. But for Ethan, the moment was far from trivial. He felt the weight of every eye in the cabin on him, a rare experience for a man who prided himself on his unassuming presence. Without a word, Ethan rose from his seat. He retrieved his bag from the overhead compartment, his movements deliberate and calm. There was no argument, no dramatic display of resistance. He simply nodded politely to the passengers nearby down the aisle, exiting the plane with quiet dignity. As he stepped into the terminal, a swirl of emotions coursed through him. Shock, disbelief, and most of all, an unfamiliar sting of humiliation. Ethan had always been a man who controlled his environment, who bent circumstances to his will. But at this moment, he had been reduced to a mere passenger dismissed from a flight. Standing alone in the terminal, Ethan's mind began to race. This wasn't just a matter of inconvenience, it was a matter of principle. He was not the type to seek revenge for some minor lights, but this incident felt different. It wasn't about ego, it was about respect. And Ethan Blake, for all his humility, was not a man to be underestimated. What happened next would ripple across the aviation industry, creating headlines and rewriting corporate power rules. In that quiet moment at the terminal, Ethan made a decision that would set his life and the fate of an entire airline on a collision course with destiny. Ethan stood motionless in the bustling terminal, the echo of Laura's words still fresh in his mind. "If you can't follow the rules, I'll have to ask you to leave the plane." It wasn't the first time someone had spoken to him with authority, but the context made it sting. Laura had no idea who he was. How could she? Yet her tone and approach had reduced him to someone insignificant. Ethan found the encounter unsettling, and Ashen found it disturbing, as a man accustomed to respect earned through rising. It wasn't merely the insult that lingered, but the principle behind it. He wasn't one to lose his composure or act impulsively, but this event marked a rare exception. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. The screen displayed Michael Cohen, his longtime lawyer and trusted advisor. Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ethan, I just heard what happened," Michael began without preamble. His tone was calm, but there was a sharp edge of concern. "Do you want me to address this? File a formal complaint or something more substantial?" Ethan let out a quiet sigh, his mind racing. In his world, problems were rarely met with half measures. "No," he replied after a moment. "I don't want an apology. I want something more meaningful. I want control." "Control?" Michael asked, his tone now cautious. "Yes, Michael. The airline," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I want it in my name." There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if Michael was processing the enormity of the request. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious," Ethan replied. "No one disrespects me publicly and walks away thinking it's acceptable. This is more than me. It's about sending a message." Michael had seen Ethan tackle impossible challenges before, but this was different. This wasn't about profits or portfolio expansion. This was personal. Ethan didn't need the airline. He already had more wealth than he could spend in a lifetime. What he needed was a symbol, a reminder to the world of the influence he carried. "All right," Michael said finally. "I'll mobilize the team. But you know this won't be easy. The airline's board won't hand over control without a fight." "They don't have to hand it over," Ethan replied calmly. "We'll make them an offer they can't refuse. If they resist, we'll outmaneuver them. It's a game I've played before." Michael paused, the sound of papers rustling faintly audible over the phone. "This will take resources, leverage, and time," he warned. "But if anyone can pull it off, it's you." Ethan didn't need reassurance. He was already calculating the moves ahead. His success wasn't built on rash decisions, but on a precise ability to turn setbacks into opportunities. This moment would be no different. As the call ended, Ethan's focus sharpened. He moved to a quiet corner of the terminal and began making calls. Within minutes, his financial advisors and legal team were looped in, each receiving specific instructions. The mission was clear: initiate a takeover of Horizon Airlines, the company that had just humiliated him. While others might have sought revenge through lawsuits or public complaints, Ethan knew that true power lay in ownership. If he could control the airline, he wouldn't just address a slight, but rewrite the narrative entirely. The very company that had dismissed him would soon answer to him. Back in the terminal, the other passengers from Ethan's flight had begun to board a replacement aircraft. unaware of the monumental shift quietly brewing. Meanwhile, Laura continued her duties on board, oblivious to the ripple effects of her actions. She had no clue that the man she had dismissed as just another passenger was orchestrating a plan that would shake the foundation of her employer's operations. When Ethan returned to his Manhattan office later that evening, the wheels were already in motion. A conference call with Michael and his top financial strategist, Daniel Hart, solidified the initial steps of the plan. "We've analyzed Horizon's market position," Daniel explained, his voice crisp. "Their shares have hit recently due to operational inefficiencies and customer complaints. They're vulnerable to a strategic buyout." "Good," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "I don't just want a piece of this company, Daniel. I want enough shares to ensure full control." "What's the fastest route?" Daniel hesitated for only a moment. "We'll need to start purchasing shares quietly to avoid raising alarms. At the same time, we'll pressure major stakeholders to consider selling their stakes. But there's one issue. Warren Harris's CEO is known for being particularly defensive about hostile takeovers. He won't make this easy." Ethan's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then we'll make it harder for him. Push ahead." Over the following hours, Ethan's team worked with relentless precision. Calls were made to critical investors, enticing them with offers above market value. Meanwhile, his legal team examined Horizon's corporate structure, identifying vulnerabilities that could expedite the process. Ethan, however, maintained an air of calm. He wasn't one to micromanage, trusting his team to execute the plan while he focused on the broader strategy. He had one goal: ensure Horizon Airlines would be fully aware of the storm headed their way by morning. As the hours ticked by, Ethan's initial frustration became more calculated. The sting of the incident on the plane no longer dominated his thoughts. Instead, he felt the familiar rush of purpose. He thrived in moments like these, where the odds seemed stacked against him, and victory required cunning rather than brute force. The contrast between his calm demeanor and the chaos unfolding within Horizon Airlines leadership was striking. Warren Harris was already fielding frantic calls from board members at their headquarters as news of unusual stock activity began circulating. Horizon's stock prices had surged unexpectedly, prompting speculation about a potential acquisition. "Who's behind this?" Warren demanded during an emergency meeting with his executive team. "We need answers now." But as his team scrambled for information, Ethan's name had yet to surface. He was operating in the shadows, leveraging his connections and resources to stay ahead of Horizon's defenses. Back in his office, Ethan reviewed the progress reports from his team. Everything was proceeding as planned. Key investors were beginning to sell their shares, and Horizon's board grew increasingly unsettled. It wouldn't be long before they were forced to confront the reality of the situation. Yet, as the pieces fell into place, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He wasn't driven by malice or a desire for revenge. This was about principle, about proving to himself and others that no one could disregard him without consequence. Ethan's approach wasn't about humiliation, but creating a narrative where he held power, not as a petty reaction, but as a calculated move that would leave a lasting impact. This wasn't just a takeover, it was a statement. And in his world, statements carried weight. The morning sun filtered through the glass panels of Ethan Blake's Manhattan office, illuminating the sleek, minimalist decor that reflected his approach to business. No clutter, no distractions, just precision. He had barely slept, yet the adrenaline coursing through him masked any exhaustion. Today was when Horizon Airlines board would learn precisely who orchestrated the unexpected buyout. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand as he scanned the latest updates on his tablet. His financial team had secured a significant portion of the company's shares overnight. Meanwhile, his legal team had sent initial notices to Horizon's board members, signaling the seriousness of his intent. The response was swift. Calls flooded into his office, mainly Verizon executives seeking answers. Ethan ignored them all. He preferred to keep them guessing, allowing their unease to fester before making his next move. At Horizon Airlines headquarters, the mood was anything but calm. Warren Harris, the company's CEO, paced back and forth in the boardroom, his face etched with frustration. A customarily composed leader, Warren now found himself blindsided by the sudden surge in stock purchases. "How did this happen?" he demanded, slamming a hand on the table. "We're still gathering details," one of his senior advisors replied nervously, "but whoever it is, they've been extremely calculated. The purchases have been spread across various entities, making it difficult to trace the source." "Unacceptable," Warren barked. "Find out who's behind this, and double down on any defenses we can muster. I won't let some shadow investor take control of this company." The rest of the board murmured in agreement, though their unease was palpable. For years, Horizon had prided itself on stability, weathering the highs and lows of the aviation industry with resilience. But that stability was under threat now, and they had no idea who or what they were up against. Back in his office, Ethan finally made his move. He instructed his lawyer, Michael, to issue a formal statement to Horizon's board, revealing his identity and intentions. The message was simple, yet powerful. Ethan Blake intended to acquire Horizon Airlines outright and was prepared to negotiate or force their compliance. Michael hesitated before sending the statement. "This will put everything out in the open," he warned. "Once they know it's you, they'll rally their defenses." Ethan smirked. "Let them. They'll soon realize that resisting me is futile." Within minutes, Horizon's board members were reading Ethan's declaration. The news hit like a thunderbolt. Warren Harris's expression darkened as he scanned the document, his grip tightening on the paper. "Ethan Blake," he muttered under his breath. The name was known to everyone in the room. Ethan's reputation as a relentless businessman preceded him. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a force of nature who didn't just buy companies but transformed them, often leaving his competitors scrambling to catch up. "This isn't just an acquisition," Warren said grimly. "It's a takeover, and if we don't act fast, we'll lose everything." While Horizon scrambled to respond, Ethan was already 2 steps ahead. He knew Warren would resist, so he devised a strategy that left no room for escape. Over the next few hours, his team worked tirelessly to secure even more shares, consolidating his control over the company's voting power. By midday, Ethan's lawyers sent a second message to Horizon's board, outlining his offer. It was generous, far above market value, but it came with an explicit request: accept the terms or face a hostile takeover. The request sent shockwaves through Horizon's leadership. Warren convened an emergency meeting with his board, where tempers flared and tensions ran high. "We can't just roll over," one board member argued. "If we give in, we'll lose our autonomy. And if we fight, we'll lose the company entirely," another countered. "Blake has the resources to outlast us. We're cornered." Warren listened in silence, his mind racing. He had spent over a decade steering Horizon through turbulent times, and the thought of losing control to an outsider was unbearable. Yet he knew the reality of the situation. Ethan Blake was no ordinary adversary. As the chaos unfolded at Horizon, Ethan remained calm, already envisioning what he would do once the company was his. To him, this wasn't just about proving a point, but about opportunity. Horizon's potential had been squandered by years of complacent leadership, and Ethan saw an opening to turn the airline into a powerhouse. He imagined streamlined operations, improved customer experiences, and a corporate culture rooted in efficiency and respect. While his initial motivation had been personal, he now felt excited by the prospect of transformation. Ethan knew that taking over Horizon wouldn't just make headlines, it would set a precedent. It would show the world that even the smallest slight against him could lead to monumental change. Late in the evening, Ethan received a call from Michael. "They've requested a meeting," he said. Ethan smiled. Of course they have. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning, to be held at a neutral location in Midtown Manhattan. Ethan arrived punctually, his presence commanding as he entered the sleek conference room where Horizon's board awaited him. Warren Harris rose to greet him, extending a hand. "Mr. Blake," he said, forcing a smile. "We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us." Ethan shook his hand briefly, his expression unreadable. "Let's get to the point," he said, taking a seat. Over the next hour, the two sides engaged in tense negotiations. Warren attempted to argue for a partnership rather than a complete acquisition, but Ethan dismissed the idea outright. "I'm not here to partner," Ethan said firmly. I'm here to lead. You've had your chance to run this company, and it's clear that changes are needed. This is the best outcome for everyone involved, if you accept it. The room fell silent as Warren and his board exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Ethan was right. Resistance would only prolong the inevitable. Finally, Warren sighed and leaned forward. We'll need time to review the terms, he said. You have 24 hours, Ethan replied. After that, my offer becomes non-negotiable. As Ethan left the meeting, he felt a surge of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, just as he had planned. Horizon Airlines was on the brink of becoming his, and with it, the narrative of the incident on the plane would be rewritten. Ethan's actions weren't just about taking over a company. They were about redefining what it meant to challenge him. The following day, the city hummed with its usual frenetic energy, but inside the offices of Horizon Airlines, the atmosphere was tense. The clock was ticking, and the company's board of directors ran out of time to respond to Ethan Blake's request. Warren Harris sat at the head of the long mahogany conference table, his expression grim. The board members surrounded him, their faces a mixture of frustration, resignation, and lingering defiance. What are our options? One asked, breaking the silence. Warren exhaled deeply, his fingers drumming against the polished wood. Options? Let's not kid ourselves. We've analyzed this from every angle. Blake's got us boxed in. We can try to fight, but he's already secured a controlling stake. The longer we resist, the worse this will get for us. Another member, an older woman with decades of experience in corporate negotiations, leaned forward. If we're going to lose, let's at least get something out of it. He's offering above market value. That kind of deal doesn't come around often. But what happens to us? Another board member countered. Do you think Blake will let us keep our positions once he's in charge? The room fell silent. They all knew the answer. Ethan wasn't the type to leave loose ends. While Horizon's board deliberated, Ethan was back in his office, calmly reviewing the latest updates from his team. The legal paperwork was ready, and the financial backwash engine was secured. The deal was now a matter of formality. Michael entered the room with a stack of documents in hand. It's almost done, he said. The board is meeting as we speak, but the numbers are in your favor. They can delay, but they can't stop this. Ethan nodded, his focus unshaken. Good. Once we finalize the acquisition, I want immediate access to their internal operations. There's no time to waste. Michael hesitated. You know they're not just going to roll over, right? Even after you take control, there will be resistance. Warren Harris's CEO has been at the helm for over a decade. He's not going to leave quietly. I'm not expecting him to, Ethan said simply. But that's his problem, not mine. By midday, Horizon's board reached a consensus. With no feasible alternatives and the looming threat of a hostile takeover, they reluctantly agreed to Ethan's terms. Warren Harris made the call himself, his tone clipped but composed. Congratulations, Mr. Blake, he said. You've won. We'll sign the documents later today. Ethan's response was measured, almost indifferent. Good decision, Mr. Harris. You've saved us all a lot of time. Despite his outward calm, a flicker of satisfaction coursed through him. The airline was officially his, a trophy born out of vanity and necessity. Ethan had turned an act of humiliation into a move of monumental power. Later that afternoon, the deal was signed in a private conference room at a high-rise overlooking the city. The atmosphere was formal, almost sterile, as lawyers and advisors shuffled papers back and forth. Warren Harris sat across from Ethan, his expression stoic, but his eyes betraying a hint of defeat. Ethan, on the other hand, exuded quiet confidence. As he signed the final document, effectively securing ownership of Horizon Airlines, he glanced at Warren. I appreciate your cooperation, he said, his tone neutral. Warren forced a thin smile. I hope you know what you're doing, Blake. This is a complex business, not as forgiving as the tech world. Ethan met his gaze evenly. I thrive in complexity, Mr. Harris. But thank you for the warning. The news broke within hours. Headlines splashed across major outlets. Ethan Blake acquires Horizon Airlines in unprecedented power move. The media frenzy was immediate, with analysts debating the implications of the acquisition. Some called it a genius business move, while others criticized it as an act of unchecked ambition. Ethan, however, paid little attention to the noise. But go back. At Horizon Airlines headquarters, the atmosphere was one of subdued chaos. Employees whispered in hushed tones, trying to piece together what the takeover meant for their jobs and the company's future. Ethan wasted no time asserting his authority. He scheduled a meeting with Horizon's senior executives the following morning, signaling that changes were imminent. The boardroom was filled with nervous energy as Horizon's leadership team gathered to meet their new owner. Ethan entered the room with purpose, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Good morning," he began, his tone calm but firm. "I won't take up too much of your time, but I want to clarify. Horizon Airlines is no longer the company you knew. From this moment forward, it operates under my vision." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the group. "I've studied this company," Ethan continued, pacing slowly. "And while it has potential, it's been plagued by inefficiencies, complacency, and a lack of respect for employees and customers. That changes now." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "If you're here to resist change, this isn't your place. But if you're ready to innovate, to work harder and smarter than ever, then I promise you this: Horizon Airlines will not just survive, it will thrive." A murmur rippled through the room. Some executives nodded cautiously, while others exchanged uncertain glances. "Questions?" Ethan asked, though his tone made it clear that he wasn't interested in excuses. One executive, a middle-aged man with decades of experience, raised his hand. "What about the existing leadership structure? Will we have a chance to prove ourselves under your management?" Ethan considered the question for a moment. "Leadership will be evaluated based on performance," he said. "Those who align with my vision and deliver results will remain. The rest won't." As the meeting concluded, Ethan left the room with a sense of accomplishment. The takeover was complete, but the real work was just beginning. He knew that transforming Horizon Airlines would require more than just new policies and procedures. It would demand a cultural shift. Ethan wasn't afraid of the challenge. He welcomed it. For him, success wasn't just about owning a company, but redefining what that company stood for. And for the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The airline that had once humiliated him was now his to command, and he intended to ensure that it would never underestimate anyone, especially him, again. The takeover was just the beginning. Ethan Blake wasn't the type to celebrate victories prematurely. For him, the true challenge and the thrill lay in the transformation that followed. Now that Horizon Airlines was his, the real work could begin. The following day, Ethan arrived at the company's headquarters, a sleek glass-fronted building in the city's heart. It was his first official day as the owner, and he intended to set the tone immediately. Employees watched his intimidating and magnetic presence from their desks as he walked through the halls. Ethan's first order of business was a full-scale review of Horizon's operations. He assembled a team of trusted advisors and tasked them with analyzing every aspect of the airline, from its finances to customer service protocols. His instructions were clear: identify and eliminate the weak points, no matter how entrenched they were. Change, however, was welcome. Within days, Ethan's sweeping reforms began to unsettle the senior management team. Many had grown comfortable under the previous leadership, operating with minimal oversight and clinging to outdated practices. One of the most vocal critics was Horizon's COO, Gregory Harlan. Gregory, an aviation industry veteran, spent years building his reputation and wasn't about to let an outsider dismantle what he had helped create. During an executive meeting, Gregory voiced his concerns. "With all due respect, Mr. Blake," he began, his tone measured but firm, "you're moving too fast. The airline industry isn't like the tech world. It's not built for rapid changes." Ethan listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When Gregory finished, Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Mr. Harlan," he said, his voice calm but cutting, "you're right. The airline industry isn't like the tech world. That's precisely why it's been stagnant for so long. You've had years to fix these problems, yet here we are. So unless you have a better plan, I suggest you either get on board or step aside." The room fell silent. Gregory opened his mouth to respond, but thought better of it. He nodded stiffly and sat back, his frustration evident. Ethan turned his attention to the rest of the executives. "Let me be clear," he said. "This isn't about tearing down what's been built. It's about strengthening it. If any of you think you can't keep up, now is the time to say so. There's no shame in stepping aside, but there is shame in holding this company back. Despite the initial resistance, Ethan's vision began to take shape. He introduced a series of bold initiatives aimed at modernizing Horizon's operations and revitalizing its image. One of his first moves was to streamline the company's organizational structure. He replaced inefficient processes with data-driven solutions, cutting costs without sacrificing quality. He also prioritized improving the customer experience, from faster check-ins to more comfortable seating options. However, Ethan's focus on employee culture was perhaps the most radical change. He believed that the success of any business depended on its people, and Horizon Airlines was no exception. Ethan launched new training programs to empower employees and foster a sense of pride in their work. He also implemented a performance-based incentive system, rewarding those who exceeded expectations and holding others accountable. Only some people embraced these changes with enthusiasm, but Ethan was undeterred. He knew cultural shifts took time and was willing to be patient if progress was made. As the weeks passed, the results of Ethan's leadership became evident. Productivity increased, customer satisfaction scores climbed, and the company's stock price began to recover. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Industry analysts praised Ethan's bold approach, while competitors scrambled to keep up. Horizon Airlines was no longer seen as a struggling company. It was becoming a formidable player in the aviation world. Yet for all his success, Ethan remained focused on his ultimate goal, ensuring that Horizon embodied the values he held dear: efficiency, respect, and innovation. Amid the whirlwind of changes, Ethan hadn't forgotten the catalyst, Laura, the flight attendant who had sparked this journey. He hadn't sought her out immediately. He had deliberately avoided any rash decisions, knowing that the moment would come when the timing was right. He remains in her role, unaware of the storm brewing around her. But as Horizon's transformation gained momentum, Ethan decided it was time to address the unresolved tension. One morning, Ethan instructed his HR team to review Laura's file. It didn't take long to uncover a pattern of complaints from passengers and colleagues about her abrasive demeanor. While competent at her job, her attitude often left a sour impression, a liability for an airline striving to rebuild its reputation. Ethan called a meeting with the HR department. "Prepare a performance review," he said. "I want to address this personally." The team exchanged nervous glances. It was highly unusual for the owner of a company to get involved in such matters, but no one dared question Ethan's decision. Later that week, Laura was summoned to a private meeting. She arrived at the designated office, her expression mixed with curiosity and apprehension. She had heard the rumors about the new owner's hands-on approach, but hadn't expected to find herself on his radar. When she entered the room, Ethan was already seated at the head of the table. He gestured for her to sit, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "Laura," he began, his voice measured, "I'm sure you're aware of the changes happening within this company. Horizon Airlines is transforming, requiring every employee to align with a new set of standards." Laura nodded cautiously. "Yes, Mr. Blake, I've noticed the changes." Ethan studied her for a moment before continuing. "Your record shows you're capable, but highlights some recurring issues, specifically your interactions with passengers and colleagues. Can you explain that?" Laura hesitated, her mind racing. She knew what he was referring to but wasn't sure how to defend herself. I've always tried to do my job to the best of my ability," she said. "But sometimes situations can be stressful, and I may come across as firm." Ethan's gaze remained steady. Firm is acceptable, disrespectful is not. The incident that brought us here is a prime example. You didn't just enforce a rule, you made it personal. That's not the culture we're building here. Laura's face flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and anger rising. "With all due respect, sir, I was following protocol," she said, her voice wavering. And yet, Ethan replied evenly, "It's not what you did, it's how you did it. Actions have consequences, Laura. This meeting is one of them." By the end of the meeting, Ethan made his decision clear. Laura would be relieved of her duties, effective immediately. While it wasn't an easy conversation, Ethan knew it was necessary to set a precedent. As Laura left the room, Her expression was a mix of defiance and resignation, and Ethan felt a sense of closure. The incident that had started it all was finally behind him. But for Ethan, this wasn't about punishing one person, but creating a foundation for something greater. Horizon Airlines was his now, and he intended to ensure that every decision reflected his vision, no matter how small. The dismissal of Laura, though difficult, marked a turning point for Ethan Blake. It wasn't about retribution or humiliation, but about setting a tone that demanded respect and excellence across every level of Horizon Airlines. With that chapter behind him, Ethan returned to the immense task, reshaping the company from the ground up. The news of Laura's departure spread quickly among the staff. For some, it was a stark reminder of Ethan's no-nonsense approach to leadership. For others, it was a signal of hope, that the company was finally being steered in a direction where actions had consequences and merit mattered more than tenure. Ethan needed to be more interested in how the decision was perceived. He prioritized ensuring Horizon became a symbol of innovation, efficiency, and respect within the airline industry. And for that to happen, the cultural shift he envisioned needed to be more than superficial. After Laura's departure, one of E's employees was implementing a company-wide leadership program. He wanted to foster an environment where employees felt valued but also understood the expectations placed upon them. He brought in external consultants known for transforming corporate cultures to achieve this. The program focused on 3 pillars: accountability, communication, and customer-first thinking. Ethan believed that these principles, if instilled properly, would improve Horizon's operations and set it apart from competitors. An airline isn't just planes and schedules, Ethan told his senior team during a strategy meeting. It's people. And people are the reason customers choose one airline over another. If we treat our passengers respectfully and care, they'll return. If we treat our employees the same way, they'll stay and perform better. The message resonated with some, but others remained skeptical. Changing a culture was no small task, especially in a company that had grown complacent. Yet Ethan's determination was unyielding. As Horizon began its transformation, the industry took notice. Competitors, once dismissive of the struggling airline, now watched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Ethan's bold acquisition had already sent ripples through the market, but the changes he was implementing threatened to further disrupt the status quo. Some rival CEOs criticized Ethan publicly, accusing him of being a tech mogul out of his depth in the aviation world. Others quietly sought to undermine his efforts, spreading rumors of internal discord within Horizon. Ethan, however, paid little attention to the noise. "Let them talk," he told Michael during a lunch meeting. "While they waste time criticizing me, I'll be busy making Horizon the best airline in the industry." His confidence wasn't misplaced. Under his leadership, Horizon's operational efficiency improved dramatically. Flight delays were reduced, customer complaints dropped, and employee morale, while still in flux, began to show signs of improvement. Despite the progress, Ethan knew he couldn't achieve his vision alone. One of his top priorities was assembling a leadership team that shared his commitment to excellence. This meant making tough decisions about who stayed and who left. Over the next few weeks, several senior executives were replaced, including Gregory Harlan, the COO who had resisted Ethan's reforms. In his place, Ethan appointed Rachel Morris, a rising star in the industry known for her innovative thinking and collaborative leadership style. Rachel's appointment was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a breath of fresh air, while others questioned whether someone so young could handle the pressures of a major airline. Ethan, however, had no doubts. "Rachel understands what the company needs," he told the remaining executives during a leadership meeting, "and she dares to make the changes necessary to get us there. That's what matters." Just as things seemed to stabilize, an unexpected challenge threatened to derail Ethan's plans. A high-profile investigative report surfaced, scrutinizing the aggressive tactics used during Horizon's acquisition. While the report didn't reveal any illegal activity, it painted Ethan as a ruthless businessman prioritizing power over people. The media frenzy that followed was relentless. Headlines like "The Dark Side of Ethan Blake's Empire" and "Is Horizon's New Leader Too Brutal for the Skies?" dominated the news cycle for days. For the first time since taking over the airline, Ethan felt the weight of public perception bearing down on him. While he had not sought approval, he understood the importance of maintaining trust with customers, employees, and stakeholders. In response, Ethan called an all-hands meeting at Horizon's headquarters. Standing before a room packed with employees and streaming live to others across the company, he addressed the controversy head-on. Yes, the acquisition was aggressive, he admitted. And yes, I made decisions that some might find harsh. But let me be clear. Everything I've done has been to secure the future of this airline. My goal is not to destroy, it's to rebuild. And that starts with trust. He paused, scanning the room. Trust isn't something you ask for, it's something you earn. Over the coming months, I'll work harder than ever to earn yours. But I need your help. If we're going to make Horizon the best airline in the world, we must do it together. The speech was met with a standing ovation from some and polite applause from others. While it didn't erase the criticism, it reminded everyone of Ethan's commitment to the company's success. Ethan doubled down on his efforts to reshape Horizon's image. He launched a series of community outreach programs, partnering with local organizations to support education, sustainability, and workforce development. While not directly tied to the airline's operations, these initiatives helped build goodwill and shifted the narrative away from the controversy. Within months, Horizon began to regain public trust. Customers praised the airline's improved services, employees reported higher job satisfaction, and investors were bullish on its stock again. Ethan, however, didn't allow himself to grow complacent. He knew that the work was far from over. The transformation wasn't a one-time event. It was an ongoing process. Late one evening, as the office emptied and the city skyline glittered outside his window, Ethan allowed himself a rare moment of quiet reflection. He remembered the day Laura had confronted him on the plane, setting this entire chain of events into motion. What had started as a personal slight had evolved into something far more significant. Ethan wasn't just rebuilding a company, but redefining himself as a leader. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't expected: pride. Not in his wealth or power, but in the knowledge that he was creating something meaningful that would outlast him. Horizon Airlines was no longer just an airline. It was a symbol, a testament to resilience, reinvention, and the power of a single decision to change everything. Ethan Blake's relentless efforts to transform Horizon Airlines were beginning to show results. The airline, once mired in inefficiency and plagued by a tarnished reputation, was now becoming a symbol of renewal and progress. Customers took notice of the streamlined boarding processes, more comfortable in-flight experiences, and improved customer service. Internally, employees were adapting to the new culture, though not without growing pains. Bookmark. Ethan knew that success on the surface wasn't enough. To ensure the longevity of Horizon's transformation, the changes had to ripple through every company layer. From the ground crews handling luggage to the executives overseeing strategy, everyone needed to embrace the new standards or risk being left behind. While many employees were beginning to align with the company's new direction, resistance still lingered in pockets of the organization. Some veteran staff clung to old habits, viewing Ethan's reforms as overbearing and unnecessary. For them, traditional business methods have been good enough for decades. Ethan had anticipated this resistance and addressed it head-on during a leadership meeting. "Change is uncomfortable," he said, pacing before the seated executives. "But comfort is the enemy of growth. If you're holding on to the past, you're not just resisting me. You're holding this company back. And that's something I won't tolerate." The message was clear: adapt or leave. Within weeks, several more employees, including a few mid-level managers, chose to step down rather than embrace the new expectations. While disruptive in the short term, their departures allowed Ethan to bring in fresh talent, individuals who shared his vision for Horizon's future. For those who stayed, Ethan understood the importance of building trust. He wasn't naive. He knew his aggressive approach had left some employees wary of his leadership. He is open door to address this, encouraging employees at all levels to share their concerns and ideas directly. One such meeting stood out to Ethan. A young flight attendant named Sophia requested a one-on-one conversation. Nervously, she entered his office and took a seat across from him. "Mr. Blake, Thank you for taking the time, she began, fidgeting slightly. I just wanted to say that while some of us were initially skeptical, we can see the changes you're trying to make. But it hasn't been easy. Ethan leaned forward, giving her his full attention. Go on, he said. Sophia hesitated before continuing. There's still a lot of fear among the staff. Some of us worry that if we make one mistake. Tannen nodded thoughtfully. I understand, he said. Fear can be a powerful motivator, but it's not sustainable. My goal isn't to create an environment where people are afraid. It's to create one where they're inspired to do their best. And that starts with trust. He paused, letting the words sink in. Thank you for your honesty, Sophia. I'll take this to heart. Conversations like this reinforced Ethan's belief that transformation wasn't just about systems and processes, but at people. Over time, his commitment to fostering an open, transparent culture began to pay off. Employees who once viewed him as an outsider began to see him as a leader who genuinely cared about their success. As Horizons solidified its internal transformation, Ethan began looking outward. The airline industry was fiercely competitive, and while Horizon was making strides, its rivals weren't standing still. One competitor, Skyreach Airlines, has been a dominant player in the market for years. Known for its luxurious amenities and extensive global network, Skyreach had long been the standard against which other airlines were measured. Ethan saw Skyreach as something other than a threat, but as an opportunity. We're not going to out-luxury them, he told his executive team during a strategy session, but we can't outthink them. Efficiency and customer experience are our strengths. Let's focus on what we do best and make that our advantage. Horizon's marketing team went to work, launching a bold new campaign emphasizing reliability, affordability, and customer satisfaction. The slogan, Flying Smarter, Together, resonated with travelers who valued substance over flash. Horizon began to chip away at Skyreach's market share within months, particularly in critical domestic routes. Ethan's strategic focus was paying off, and the airline's stock price surged as investors took note of its newfound momentum. Initially criticizing Ethan's aggressive tactics, the media began to portray him more favorably. Articles highlighted Horizon's turnaround, crediting Ethan's leadership for a resurgence. One particularly glowing piece in a significant business magazine called him the visionary. The airline industry didn't know it needed. While Ethan appreciated the recognition, he remained cautious. Public opinion could shift as quickly as the wind, and he refused to let his guard down. Yet the praise did offer him a rare moment of reflection. Sitting in his office late one night, Ethan flipped through the article, pausing at a paragraph that described him as uncompromising, ambitious, and fiercely dedicated to excellence. The words struck a chord. They were accurate, but they reminded him of the man he used to be, who had let ambition overshadow everything else. The man who had started this journey out of a desire to prove a point. Ethan realized how far he had come, not just as a businessman, but as a person. The experience of rebuilding Horizon had taught him the value of balance between strength and empathy, between ambition and purpose. As Horizon Airlines continued to thrive, Ethan made one final move to solidify its transformation. He announced a company-wide initiative focused on sustainability, pledging to reduce the airline's carbon footprint and invest in renewable energy technologies. The initiative was met with widespread acclaim from environmental groups, customers, and employees who saw it as a testament to Horizon's commitment to innovation and responsibility. Ethan's decision wasn't just about staying ahead of the competition and leaving a legacy. For the first time, he felt that his work was about more than just profits or power. It was about creating something lasting, something meaningful. On the first anniversary of the acquisition, Ethan hosted a celebration at Horizon's headquarters. The event was modest by corporate standards, but filled with genuine appreciation from employees who had witnessed the company's transformation firsthand. Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he stood on the stage addressing the crowd. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about all of us. Horizon Airlines is more than a company, it's a community. And together, we've proven that change is possible, even in doubt." The room erupted in applause, and Ethan felt at peace for the first time since that fateful day on the plane. Horizon Airlines had become a reflection of everything he believed in: resilience, innovation, and the power of second chances. And for Ethan, it was only the beginning. As Horizon Airlines soared to new heights, Ethan Blake began to see the bigger picture of his journey. The airline was no longer just a company to him. It had become a testament to his ability to adapt, lead, and redefine success. Yet, despite the achievements, one thought continued to linger at the edges of his mind. Laura. For months, Ethan had pushed her out of his focus. He'd made his decision, and it was final. But as he reflected on the chain of events, he realized that Laura's actions, her defiance, hand, and lack of judgment had been the spark that ignited everything. Strangely, she had been the catalyst for Horizon's rebirth. It wasn't a matter of seeking closure or dwelling on the past. Ethan was not a man who looked back with regret, but he couldn't ignore the irony of it all. Without Laura's actions that day on the plane, none of this would have happened. One day, as Ethan reviewed Horizon's latest performance reports, he scrolled through old documents. Among them was Laura's personnel file, which lagged during her dismissal. He read through the notes. A capable but high-strung employee, praised for her efficiency but criticized for her rigid demeanor. He couldn't help but wonder what had become of her. Ethan rarely concerned himself with former employees, but Laura was different. She had unknowingly challenged him in a way no one else had, setting him on a path of transformation. Out of curiosity, Ethan quietly instructed his assistant to look into her situation. A week later, the report arrived on his desk. The findings surprised him. Laura had struggled to find stable employment since her departure from Horizon. Her reputation had preceded her, and the aviation industry, small and interconnected, had shut mainly here out. She had taken a series of short-term jobs, none of which lasted, and was now a bartender at a small cafe near the airport. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Guilt. He wasn't one to second-guess his decisions, but the thought of someone being reduced to such circumstances because of a single moment gave him pause. On a rainy afternoon, Ethan made an uncharacteristic decision. He left his office without notifying his team and drove to the cafe where Laura worked. It was a modest establishment, the kind of place frequented by weary travelers and airport staff. As he entered, the sound of rain against the windows mixed with the soft hum of conversation. Laura was behind the counter, pouring coffee for a customer. She looked different. Tired, perhaps, but not defeated. Ethan took a seat at an empty table and waited. It wasn't long before Laura approached, her polite smile faltering when she recognized him. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice laced with surprise and apprehension. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Ethan returned her gaze evenly. "Neither was I," he admitted. "But I thought it was time we had a conversation." Laura hesitated before sitting down across from him. "I'm not sure what there is to talk about," she said, her tone guarded. "Quite a lot, actually," Ethan replied. "But let me start by saying this. You were right." The words caught her off guard. "Right about what?" "You were enforcing the rules," he said. "And in your mind, you were doing your job. I won't deny that I've thought about that day more than I expected to. At the time, I saw it as disrespect. But now, I see it differently. It was a turning point, not just for me but for this company." Laura frowned, wondering where the conversation was going. "That doesn't change what happened afterward," she said quietly. "I lost everything because of that day." Ethan nodded. "I know, and I take responsibility for that. I won't ask for your forgiveness, but I will say this. Horizon Airlines wouldn't be what it is today without you. That's not an excuse for what you went through. It's just the truth." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain continued to fall outside, casting a muted glow over the cafe. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "What are your plans now?" he asked. Laura hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. "The aviation industry doesn't want me, and I'm not sure where else I belong." Ethan leaned forward, his expression softening. "What if I told you Horizon could use someone like you?" Laura's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious? After everything that happened?" "Completely serious," Ethan said. "You have the skills, the discipline, and yes, the stubbornness that this company needs. What you lacked before was perspective. I think the past few months have given you that. If you're willing to start fresh, so am I." Laura stared at him, struggling to process his words. The offer was unexpected, almost surreal. She had spent months resenting Ethan Blake, blaming him for her downfall. Yet he was extending an olive branch she hadn't thought possible. "Why would you do this?" she asked finally. "Because I believe in second chances," Ethan replied simply. "And because I think you've learned what it means to face adversity. That's a lesson most people don't get in a lifetime." After a moment's thought, Laura nodded. "All right," she said cautiously. "I'll take you up on your offer. But I'm not expecting any favors." "Good," Ethan said with a faint smile. "Because you won't get any. If you return, you'll earn your place just like everyone else. But I have no doubt you'll rise to the occasion." As they shook hands, a sense of closure settled over Ethan. This wasn't about undoing the past, but creating a future where mistakes could be learned and respect was earned, not demanded. It was an opportunity for Laura to rebuild her career and confidence. For Ethan, it was a reminder that leadership wasn't just about making tough decisions. It was about recognizing the potential for growth in others, even when it seemed unlikely. As Ethan drove back to his office, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The encounter with Laura had been unexpected, but it reinforced something he deeply valued: the power of transformation in business and people. Horizon Airlines was thriving, but the true victory wasn't in the numbers or accolades for Ethan. In such moments, progress wasn't just measured in profits and the lives it touched. He knew that his journey with Horizon was far from over. There would be more challenges, more victories, and more lessons. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had turned a moment of conflict into an opportunity for redemption, for himself, for Laura, and for the company they were helping to shape. Months passed, and Horizon Airlines thrived under Ethan Blake's leadership. The company had transformed from a struggling airline to an industry leader, praised for its innovation and efficiency. Customers appreciated the reliability and care they received, while employees found themselves part of a workplace that valued their contributions. The success was gratifying for Ethan, but it was no longer just about numbers and accolades. His journey with Horizon shifted his perspective, teaching him leadership was not about dominance, but nurturing growth and resilience. Laura's return to Horizon was met with mixed reactions. Some employees viewed her as a symbol of redemption, a living testament to Ethan's commitment to second chances. Others were more skeptical, questioning whether her past behavior could be reconciled with the company's new culture. Ethan made it clear that Laura's role would not be ceremonial. She was placed in a demanding position, overseeing the training of new flight attendants and ensuring that Horizon's values were instilled from day one. "Your job is to make them better than we ever were," Ethan told her during one of their meetings. "Teach them the lessons we both had to learn the hard way." At first, Laura struggled to adjust. The pressure was immense, and the scrutiny from her peers often felt overwhelming. But over time, she found her stride. Her experiences, both the highs and the lows, gave her a unique perspective that resonated with the trainees. One day, a young flight attendant asked her about handling difficult passengers during a training session. Laura smiled, remembering her own mistakes and the lessons they had taught her. "It's not just about following the rules," she said. "It's about understanding the situation, reading the person, and respectfully responding. Sometimes how you say something matters more than what you're saying." The advice struck a chord, not just with the trainee, but with Laura herself. For the first time, she felt she was genuinely contributing to Horizon's future. For Ethan, watching Laura's growth was a reminder of his journey. The man who had walked onto that plane months ago, frustrated and humiliated, was almost unrecognizable. He had entered Horizon to prove a point, but the experience had reshaped him in ways he hadn't expected. One evening, Ethan sat in his office, reviewing a report on Horizon's latest achievements. The airline's on-time performance had hit an all-time high, customer satisfaction scores were soaring, and employee turnover had dropped significantly. Yet despite the success, Ethan reflected on something more profound: the legacy he was building. In the past, Ethan had measured his accomplishments by the size of his empire and the power he wielded. But now he saw his most significant victory as his impact on others. The employees who felt empowered, the customers who felt valued, and even Laura, who had found her place once again. With Horizon firmly on its feet, Ethan began exploring new opportunities to expand the airline's reach. His vision extended beyond profits. He wanted Horizon to set a standard for the industry that prioritized sustainability, innovation, and community impact. He launched a series of initiatives to reduce the airline's environmental footprint. Horizon began investing in fuel-efficient aircraft, exploring alternative energy sources, and partnering with organizations dedicated to combating climate change. The efforts were ambitious, but Ethan believed they were necessary. "If we're going to lead this industry," he said during a company-wide address, "we can't just be the best airline. We have to be the most responsible one." The initiatives were met with widespread support, earning Horizon accolades from environmental groups and cementing its reputation as a forward-thinking company. One afternoon, Ethan met with Michael, his longtime lawyer and confidant, to discuss Horizon's future. "You've come a long way, Ethan," Michael said, leaning back in his chair. "When we started this, I never imagined it would turn into what it is today." "Neither did I," Ethan admitted. "What started as a reaction to one bad day has become much bigger. But I can't take all the credit. This company was ready for change. It just needed someone to push it." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "So what's next? You've rebuilt Horizon and turned it into a powerhouse. Are you ready to move on to the next challenge?" Ethan considered the question for a moment. "I don't know," he said honestly. "For the first time in years, I'm not focused on the next deal or acquisition. I'm focused on what we're building here. And for now, that feels like enough." As Horizon grew, Ethan began to step back from the day-to-day operations. He entrusted more responsibilities to his executive team, confident in their ability to carry the company forward. His decision wasn't born out of disinterest, but out of trust. He had built a team that shared his vision and wanted to give them the space to lead. One afternoon, as he walked through the bustling halls of Horizon's headquarters, Ethan paused to watch the employees at work. The energy was palpable, with teams collaborating, ideas flowing, and a sense of purpose driving every action. At that moment, Ethan felt a deep sense of pride. Horizon was no longer just his project. It was a living, breathing entity, shaped by the people who believed in its mission. On a quiet evening, Ethan returned to the cafe where he had first reconnected with Laura. He sat by the window, sipping coffee as the city buzzed outside. He had been a whirlwind the past year, filled with challenges, victories, and lessons. But as he reflected on it all, Ethan realized that the journey wasn't just about transforming a company, but himself. He thought about the person he had been before that fateful flight, driven, ambitious, and unrelenting. And he thought about the person he had become, a leader who valued empathy as much as strength, who saw power not as an end, but as a means to create something lasting. As he finished his coffee and prepared to leave, Ethan felt a sense of closure. The journey wasn't over. There will always be new challenges to face and new heights to reach. But for now, he was content. Horizon Airlines was more than a success story. It was a legacy. And Ethan Blake, the man who had once been underestimated, had proven that even the smallest moments could lead to the most significant transformations. Ethan Blake's story is more than just a tale of power and transformation. It's a profound reminder of how moments of adversity can spark unimaginable growth. What began as an ordinary flight devolved into a confrontation that could have left anyone feeling defeated. Yet, Ethan's response to turn humiliation into opportunity reveals a mindset that distinguishes leaders from the rest. This narrative showcases resilience, vision, and the power of calculated decisions. Ethan's journey wasn't just about acquiring an airline or proving a point. It was about redefining what it means to lead. He learned that authentic leadership isn't about crushing dissent, but inspiring people to rise to their potential, even if it means giving second chances to those who may have stumbled. The story also teaches us that change often begins in unexpected places. A small action, a moment of misunderstanding, can set off a chain of events that reshape lives, businesses, and legacies. Ethan's transformation from a man seeking to assert his authority to one driven by purpose and empathy is a lesson for anyone navigating challenges in their own lives. However, perhaps the most significant takeaway is that respect and integrity are at the heart of success. Whether you're leading a company or simply trying to make your way in the world, how you treat others, especially in moments of conflict, can define your future as much as theirs. If this story moves you, we want to hear your thoughts. Did it inspire you to see challenges differently? If you thought the story was good, comment with a 1. If you thought it was terrific, comment with a 2. And don't just stop there. Share your own stories of growth and resilience. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another meaningful story like this one. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation together.